History doesn't repeat itself, it screams warnings at us that we often choose to ignore. And this is a lesson from history we need to learn before we enter into a massive crisis. 2000 years ago, Rome created the most successful multi-ethnic empire in history. But when they abandoned their model of integration, everything began to collapse. This is an eerily familiar story. The Roman approach to integration wasn't just clever, it was essential for survival. When Rome conquered new territories, they implemented what historians called Romanization. The brilliance of this lay in its selective permissiveness. So you could keep your customs, your gods, even your local laws, but there was one non-negotiable condition: absolute loyalty to Roman civic identity and law. This wasn't diversity for diversity's sake, it was integration with a very clear purpose. So Roman identity wasn't necessarily tied to birthplace or even ethnicity, it was an aspirational identity, and it was built around civic virtue, law, and a shared cultural identity. A Gaul from modern France, a Syrian merchant, or an African tribe leader could all become fully Roman by adopting these core principles. By the 2nd century AD, you had emperors like Septimius Severus from North Africa and Philip the Arab, ruling not as diversity hires but as Romans who happened to come from elsewhere. The system's success was unprecedented. Now, rather than creating parallel societies or cultural ghettos, Rome built a unifying cultural framework that absorbed and adapted the best elements of conquered cultures. Egyptian engineering enhanced Roman architecture, Persian military tactics were incorporated into Roman legions, but crucially, everything was filtered through and subordinated to the Roman cultural framework. Then came the fatal mistake. After the 3rd century crisis, Rome essentially abandoned this tried and tested integration policy. This allowed massive groups of Goths and other tribes to settle within Roman territories while maintaining their separate cultural identities, laws, and even armies. They weren't immigrants looking to become Roman. These were entire societies transplanted wholesale into Roman territory with no intention of adopting Roman values. And the consequences of this were catastrophic. These parallel societies, bound to Rome by paper treaties rather than cultural bonds, began acting as independent entities within the empire. And by the 5th century, you had entire regions where people identified more strongly with their tribal or religious group than with Rome itself. The result? The Western Empire shattered into separate kingdoms, each defined by a distinct cultural identity. When these parallel societies finally turned on Rome, they didn't just attack the empire's borders, because they were already inside the gates with their own laws, their own armies, and their own loyalties. The collapse wasn't just swift, it essentially was inevitable. Now, this wasn't the only reason that Rome fell, but it is a key factor. If you look at any successful civilization in history, they survive by creating something greater than the sum of their parts, a core identity that transcends tribal loyalties. When societies forget this lesson, when they prioritize differing cultures over unity, and when they allow parallel societies to develop within their borders, let's just say there's a reason Latin is now essentially a dead language. And the question I want to ask is there something to be learned from this today?